seized with a desire to travel about the world, and took no one with him but a faithful servant. One day he came to a great forest, and when darkness overtook him, he could find no shelter, and knew not where to pass the night. Then he saw a girl who was going towards a small house, and when he came near her, he saw that the maiden was young and beautiful. He spoke to her and said, "Dear child, can't I and my servant find shelter for the night in the little house?" "Oh yes," said the girl in a sad voice, "that you certainly can, but I do not advise you to venture it. Do not go in." "Why not?" asked the king's son. The maiden sighed and said, "My stepmother practices wicked arts. She is ill-disposed towards strangers." Then he saw very well that he had come to the house of a witch, but as it was dark and he could not go farther, and also was not afraid, he entered. The old woman was sitting in an armchair by the fire and looked at the stranger with her red eyes. "Good evening," growled she, and pretended to be quite friendly. "Take a seat and rest yourselves." She blew up the fire on which she was cooking something in a small pot. The daughter warned the two to be prudent, to eat nothing and drink nothing, for the old woman brewed evil drinks. They slept quietly until early morning, when they were making ready for their departure, and the king's son was already seated on his horse. The old woman said, "Stop a moment, I will first hand you a parting draught." Whilst she fetched it, the king's son rode away, and the servant who had to buckle his saddle tight was the only one present when the wicked witch came with the drink. "Take that to your master," said she, but at that instant the glass broke and the poison bearded on the horse, and it was so strong that the animal immediately fell down dead. The servant ran after his master and told him what had happened, but would not leave his saddle behind him, and ran back to fetch it. When, however, he came to the dead horse, a raven was already sitting on it, devouring it. "Who knows whether we shall find anything better today?" said the servant. So he killed the raven and took it with him, and now they journeyed onwards into the forest the whole day, but could not get out of it. By nightfall they found an inn and entered it. The servant gave the raven to the innkeeper to make ready for supper. They had, however, stumbled on a den of murderers, and during the darkness 12 of these came, intending to kill the strangers and rob them. Before they set about this work, they sat down to supper, and the innkeeper and the witch sat down with them, and together they ate a dish of soup in which was cut up the flesh of the raven. Hardly, however, had they swallowed a couple of mouthfuls before they all fell down dead, for the raven had communicated to them the poison from the horse flesh. There was no one else left in the house but the innkeeper's daughter, who was honest and had taken no part in their godless deeds. She opened all the doors to the stranger and showed him the heaped up treasures. But the king's son said she might keep everything. He would have none of it, and rode onwards with his servant. After they had traveled about for a long time, they came to a town in which was a beautiful but proud princess, who had caused it to be proclaimed that whosoever should set her a riddle, which she could not guess, that man should be her husband. But if she guessed it, his head must be cut off. She had 3 days to guess it in, but was so clever that she always found the answer to the riddle given her before the appointed time. 9 suitors had already perished in this manner, but when the king's son arrived, and blinded by her great beauty, was willing to stake his life for it, then he went to her and laid his riddle before her. "What is this?" said he. "One slew none, and yet slew 12. She did not know what that was. She thought and thought, but she could not find out. She opened her riddle books, but it was not in them. In short, her wisdom was at an end. As she did not know how to help herself, she ordered her maid to creep into the lord's sleeping chamber and listen to his dreams, and thought that he would perhaps speak in his sleep, and discovered the riddle. But the clever servant had placed himself in the bed instead of his master, and when the maid came there, he tore off from her the mantle in which she had wrapped herself, and chased her out with rods. The second night the king's daughter sent her in maid-in-waiting, who was to see if she could succeed better in listening. But the understood and heard everything quite well. Then she asked, "One Slunan, what is that?" He replied, "A raven, which ate of a dead and poisoned horse and died of it." She inquired further, "And yet slew 12, what is that?" He answered, "That means 12 murderers who ate the raven and died of it." When she knew the answer to the riddle, she wanted to steal away, but he held her mantle so fast that she was forced to leave it behind her. Next morning, the king's daughter announced that she had guessed the riddle and sent for the 12 judges and expounded it before them. But the youth begged for a hearing and said, "She stole into my room in the night and questioned me, otherwise she could not have discovered it." The judges said, "Bring us proof of this." Then were the 3 mantles brought thither by the servant, and when the judges saw the misty gray one which the king's daughter usually wore, they said, "Let the mantle be embroidered with gold and silver, and then it will be your wedding mantle." The mouse, the bird, and the sausage. Once upon a time, a mouse, a bird, and a sausage became companions, kept house together, lived well and happily with each other, and wonderfully increased their possessions. The bird's work was to fly every day into the forest and bring back wood. The mouse had to carry water, light the fire, and lay the table, but the sausage had to cook. He who is too well off is always longing for something new. One day, therefore, the bird met with another bird on the way to whom it related its excellent circumstances and boasted of them. The other bird, however, called it a poor simpleton for his hard work, but said that the 2 at home had good times. For when the mouse had made her fire and carried her water, she went into her little room to rest until they called her to lay the table. The sausage stayed by the pot. Saw that the food was cooking well, and when it was nearly time for dinner, it rolled itself once or twice through the broth or vegetables, and then they were buttered, salted, and ready. When the bird came home and laid his burden down, they sat down to dinner, and after they had had their meal, they slept their fill till next morning, and that was a splendid life. Next day, the bird, prompted by the other bird, would go no more into the wood, saying that he had been servant long enough, and had been made a fool of by them, and that they must change about for once, and try to arrange it in another way. And though the mouse and the sausage also begged most earnestly, the bird would have his way, and said it must be tried. They cast lots about, and the lot fell on the sausage, who was to carry wood. The mouse became cook, and the bird was to fetch water. What happened? The little sausage went out towards the wood. The little bird lighted the fire. The mouse stayed by the pot and waited alone until little sausage came home and brought wood for the next day. But the little sausage stayed so long on the road that they both feared something was amiss, and the bird flew out a little way in the air to meet it. Not far off, however, it met a dog on the road, who had fallen on the poor sausage as lawful booty, and had seized and swallowed it. The bird charged the dog with an act of bare-faced robbery, but it was in vain to speak, for the dog said he had found forged letters on the sausage, on which account its life was forfeited to him. The bird sadly took up the wood, flew home, and related what he had seen and heard. They were much troubled, but agreed to do their best and remain together. The bird therefore laid the cloth, and the mouse made ready the food, and wanted to dress it, and to get into the pot as the sausage used to do, and roll and creep amongst the vegetables to mix them. But before she got into the midst of them, she was stopped and lost her skin and hair and life in the attempt. When the bird came to carry up the dinner, no cook was there. In its distress, the bird threw the wood here and there, called and searched, but no cook was to be found. Owing to his carelessness, the wood caught fire, so that a conflagration ensued. The bird hastened to fetch water, and then the bucket dropped from his claws into the well, and he fell down with it, and could not recover himself, but had to drown there. Mother Holle. There was once a widow and spin till her fingers bled. Now it happened that one day the shuttle was marked with her blood, so she dipped it in the well to wash the mark off. But it dropped out of her hand and fell to the bottom. She began to weep and ran to her stepmother and told her of the mishap. But she scolded her sharply and was so merciless as to say, "Since you have let the shuttle fall in, you must fetch it out again." So the girl went back to the well and did not know what to do, and in the sorrow of her heart she jumped into the well to get the shuttle. She lost her senses, and when she awoke and came to herself again, she was in a lovely meadow where the sun was shining and many thousands of flowers were growing. Along this meadow she went, and at last came to a baker's oven full of bread, and the bread cried out, "Oh, take me out, or I shall burn. I have been baked a long time." So she went up to it and took out all the loaves one after another with the bread shovel. After that she went on till she came to a tree covered with apples, which called out to her, "Oh, shake me, we apples are all ripe." So she shook the tree till the apples fell like rain, and went on shaking till they were all down, and when she had gathered them into a heap, she went on her way. At last she came to a little house, out of which an old woman peeped, but she had such large teeth that the girl was frightened and was about to run away. But the old woman called out to her, "What are you afraid of, dear child? Stay with me. If you will do all the work in the house properly, you shall be the better for it. Only you must take care to make my bed well and shake it thoroughly till the feathers fly, for then there is snow on the earth. I am Mother Holle." As the old woman spoke so kindly to her, the girl took courage and agreed to enter her service. She attended to everything to the satisfaction of her mistress, and always shook her bed so vigorously that the feathers flew about like snowflakes. So she had a pleasant life with her, never an angry word, and boiled or roast meat every day. She stayed some time with Mother Holle, and then she became sad. At first she did not know what was the matter with her, but found at length that it was homesickness, although she was many thousand times better off here than at home. Still she had a longing to be there. At last she said to the old woman, "I have a longing for home, and however well off I am down here, I cannot stay any longer. I must go up again to my own people." Mother Holle said, "I am pleased that you long for your home again, and as you have served me so truly, I myself will take you up again." Thereupon she took her by the hand and led her to a large door. The door was opened, and just as the maiden was standing beneath the doorway, a heavy shower of golden rain fell, and all the gold remained sticking to her, so that she was completely covered with it. "You shall have that because you have been so industrious," said Mother Holle, and at the same time she gave her back the shuttle which she had let fall into that well. Thereupon the door closed, and the maiden found herself up above upon the earth, not far from her mother's house. And as she went into the yard, the cock was standing by the well side and cried, "Cock-a-doodle-doo, your golden girls come back to you." So she went into her mother, and as she arrived thus covered with gold, she was well received both by her and her sister. The girl told all that had happened to her, and as soon as the mother heard how she had come by so much wealth, she was very anxious to obtain the same good luck for the ugly and lazy daughter. She had to seat herself by the well and spin, and in order that her shuttle might be stained with blood, she stuck her hand into a thorn bush and pricked her finger. Then she threw her shuttle into the well and jumped in after it. She came like the other to the beautiful meadow and walked along the very same path. When she got to the oven, the bread again cried, "Oh, take me out, or I shall burn. I have been baked a second day, she began to be lazy, and on the third day, still more so, and then she would not get up in the morning at all. Neither did she make Mother Holle's bed as she ought, and did not shake it so as to make the feathers fly up. Mother Holle was soon tired of this, and gave her notice to leave. The lazy girl was willing enough to go, and thought that now the golden rain would come. Mother Holle led her also to the great door, but while she was standing beneath it, instead of the cold, a big kettle full of pitch was emptied over her. "That is the reward for your service," said Mother Holle, and shut the door. So the lazy girl went home, but she was quite covered with pitch, and the cock by the wayside, as soon as he saw her, cried out, "Cock-a-doodle-doo, your pitchy girls come back to you." But the pitch stuck fast to her, and could not be got off as long as she lived. The 7 Ravens. There was once a man who had 7 sons, and still he had no daughter, however much he wished for one. At length his wife again gave him hope of a child, and when it came into the world it was a girl. The joy was great, but the child was sickly and small, and had to be privately baptized on account of its weakness. The father sent one of the boys in haste to the spring to fetch water for the baptism. The other 6 went with him, and as each of them wanted to be first to fill it, the jug fell into the well. There they stood and did not know what to do, and none of them dared to go home. As they still did not return, the father grew impatient and said, "They have certainly forgotten it for some game, the wicked boys." He became afraid that the girl would have to die without being baptized, and in his anger cried, "I wish the boys were all turned into ravens." Hardly was the word spoken before he heard a whirring of wings over his head in the air, looked up and saw 7 coal-black ravens flying away. The parents could not withdraw the curse, and however sad they were at the loss of their 7 sons, they still to some extent comforted themselves with their dear little daughter, who soon grew strong and every day became more beautiful. For a long time she did not know that she had brothers, for her parents were careful not to mention them before her. But one day she accidentally heard some people saying of herself that the girl was certainly beautiful, but that in reality she was to blame for the misfortune which had befallen her 7 brothers. Then she was much troubled, and went to her father and mother, and asked if it was true that she had had brothers, and what had become of them. The parents now dared keep the secret no longer, but said that what had befallen her brothers was the will of heaven, and that her birth had only been the innocent cause. But the maiden took it to heart daily, and thought she must deliver her brothers. She had no rest or peace until she set out secretly, and went forth into the wide world to trace out her brothers, and set them free, let it cost what it might. She took nothing with her but a little ring belonging to her parents as a keepsake, a loaf of bread against hunger, a little pitcher of water against thirst, and a little chair as a provision against weariness. And now she went continually onwards, far, far to the very end of the world. Then she came to the sun, but it was too hot and terrible, and devoured little children. Hastily she ran away, and ran to the moon, but it was far too cold, and also awful and malicious, and when it saw the child, it said, I smell the flesh of men." On this she ran swiftly away, and came to the stars, which were kind and good to her, and each of them sat on its own particular little chair. But the morning star arose, and gave her the drumstick of a chicken, and said, "If thou hast not that drumstick, thou canst not open the glass mountain, and in the glass mountain are thy brothers." The maiden took the drumstick, wrapped it carefully in a cloth, and went onwards again until she came to the glass mountain. The door was shut, and she thought she would take out the drumstick, but when she undid the cloth, it was empty, and she had lost the good star's present. What was she now to do? She wished to rescue her brothers, and had no key to the glass mountain. The good sister took a knife, cut off one of her little fingers, dwarf said, "The Lord Ravens are not at home, but if you will wait here until they come, step in." Thereupon the little dwarf carried the raven's dinner in on 7 little plates and 7 little glasses, and the little sister ate a morsel from each plate, and from each little glass she took a sip, but in the last little glass she dropped the ring which she had brought away with her. Suddenly she heard a whirring of wings and a rushing through the air, and then the little dwarf said, "Now the Lord Ravens are flying home." Then they came and wanted to eat and drink and looked for their little plates and glasses. Then said one after the other, "Who has eaten something from my plate? Who has drunk out of my little glass?" It was a human mouth. And when the 7th came to the bottom of the glass, the ring rolled against his mouth. Then he looked at it and saw that it was a ring belonging to his father and mother, and said, "God grant that our sister may be here, and then we shall be free." When the maiden, who was standing behind the door watching, heard that wish, she came forth, and on this all the ravens were restored to their human form again, and they embraced and kissed each other and went joyfully home. Little Red Cap. Once upon a time there was a dear little girl who was loved by everyone who looked at her, but most of all by her grandmother, and there was nothing that she would not have given to the child. Once she gave her a little cap of red velvet which suited her so well that she would never wear anything else, so she was always called Little Red Cap. One day her mother said to her, "Come, Little Red Cap, here is a piece of cake and a bottle of wine. Take them to your grandmother. She is ill and weak, and they will do her good. Set out before it gets hot, and when you are going, walk nicely and quietly, and do not run off the path, or you may fall and break the bottle, and then your grandmother will get nothing. And when you go into her room, don't forget to say, 'Good morning,' and don't peep into every corner before you do it." "I will take great care," said Little Red Cap to her mother, and gave her hand on it. The grandmother lived out in the wood, half a league from the village, and just as Little Red Cap entered the wood, a wolf met her. Red Cap did not know what a wicked creature he was, and was not at all afraid of him. "Good day, Little Red Cap," said he. "Thank you kindly, wolf. Whither away so early, Little Red Cap?" "To my grandmother's." "What have you got in your apron?" "Cake and wine. Yesterday was baking day, so poor sick grandmother is to have something good to make her stronger." "Where does your grandmother live, Little Red Cap?" "A good quarter of a league farther on in the wood. Her house stands under the 3 large oak trees. The nut trees are just below. You surely must know it," replied Little Red Cap. The wolf thought to himself, "What a tender young creature, what a nice plump mouthful. She will be better to eat than the old woman. I must act craftily so as to catch both." So he walked for a short time by the side of Little Red Cap, and then he said, "See, Little Red Cap, how pretty the flowers are about here. Why do you not look round? I believe, too, that you do not hear how sweetly the little birds are singing. You walk gravely along as if you were going to school, while everything else out here in the wood is merry." Little Red Cap raised her eyes, and when she saw the sunbeams dancing here and there through the trees and pretty flowers growing everywhere, she thought, "Suppose I take grandmother a fresh nosegay, that would please her too. It is so early in the day that I shall still get there in good time." And so she ran from the path into the wood to look for flowers, and whenever she had picked one, she fancied that she saw a still prettier one farther on, and ran after it, and so got deeper and deeper into the wood. Meanwhile the wolf ran straight to the grandmother's house and knocked at the door. "Who is there?" "Little Red Cap," replied the wolf. "She is bringing cake and wine. Open the door." "Lift the latch," called out the grandmother. "I am too weak and cannot get up." The wolf lifted the latch, the door flew open, and without saying a word, he went straight to the grandmother's bed and devoured her. that she could carry no more. She remembered her grandmother and set out on the way to her. She was surprised to find the cottage door standing open, and when she went into the room, she had such a strange feeling that she said to herself, "Oh dear, how uneasy I feel today, and at other times I like being with grandmother so much." She called out, "Good morning," but received no answer, so she went to the bed and drew back the curtains. There lay her grandmother with her cap pulled far over her face and looking very strange. "Oh, grandmother," she said, "what big ears you have." "The better to hear you with, my child," was the reply. "But grandmother, what big eyes you have," she said. "The better to see you with, my dear." "But grandmother, what large hands you have." "The better to hug you with." "Oh, but grandmother, what a terrible big mouth you have." "The better to eat you with." And scarcely had the wolf said this, than with one bound he was out of bed and swallowed up Redcap. When the wolf had appeased his appetite, he lay down again in the bed, fell asleep, and began to snore very loud. The huntsman was passing by the house and thought to himself, "How the old woman is snoring. I must just see if she wants anything." So he went into the room, and when he came back to the bed, he saw that the wolf was lying on it. "Do I find thee here, thou old sinner?" said he. "I have long sought thee." Then, just as he was going to fire at him, it occurred to him that the wolf might have devoured the grandmother, and that she still might be saved. So he did not fire, but took a pair of scissors and began to cut open the stomach of the sleeping wolf. When he had made 2 snips, he saw the little red cap shining, and then he made 2 snips more, and the little girl sprang out crying, "Ah, how frightened I have been! How dark it was inside the wolf!" And after that the aged grandmother came out alive also, but scarcely able to breathe. Redcap, however, quickly fetched great stones with which they filled the wolf's body, and when he awoke he wanted to run away, but the stones were so heavy that he fell down at once and fell dead. Then all 3 were delighted. The huntsman drew off the wolf's skin and went home with it. The grandmother ate the cake and drank the wine which Redcap had brought, and revived, but Redcap thought to herself, "As long as I live, I will never by myself leave the path to run into the wood when my mother has forbidden me to do so." It is also related that once when Redcap was again taking cakes to the old grandmother, another wolf spoke to her and tried to entice her from the path. Redcap, however, was on her guard, and went straight forward on her way, and told her grandmother that she had met the wolf, and that he had said good morning to her, but with such a wicked look in his eyes, that if they had not been on the public road, she was certain he would have eaten her up. "Well," said the grandmother, "we will shut the door that he may not come in." Soon afterwards the wolf knocked and cried, "Open the door, grandmother, I am little Redcap, and I am fetching you some cakes." But they did not speak or open the door, so the graybeard stole twice or thrice round the house, and at last jumped on the roof, intending to wait until Redcap went home in the evening, and then to steal after her and devour her in the darkness. But the grandmother saw what was in the thoughts. In front of the house was a great stone trough, so she said to the child, "Take the pail, Redcap, I made some sausages yesterday, so carry the water in which I boiled them to the trough." Redcap carried until the great trough was quite full. Then the smell of the sausages